Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I will give a few seconds while people jump in and then we will get started. But morning, John, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Really good. I'm looking forward to a bit of sunshine over the weekend. And I'm sure you're looking forward to basking in it as well.
Absolutely. I am just a flower. Get me outside with some sunshine and I will thrive.
Amazing.
Perfect. Well, welcome in everyone to today's session titled It's Not All About New Clients, How to Grow Revenue from the Ones You Already Have. And I am super excited to have John with us today to pick his brains. But my name's Kaylee Graham. I'm the Head of Partnerships and Growth here at Telleroo. For those of you that don't know Telleroo, we are a bulk payments platform for accountants and bookkeepers. But John, I will hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Jonathan Gaunt. By background, I'm an accountant, and way back in 2012, I took the kind of leap from coming from industry into working with small businesses, and I absolutely love that kind of connection of how can we help small business be more successful. Been really lucky as a result of that. I've also then spun out two software businesses. One was Xavier Analytics, which was acquired by Dext. And then we've started again and we're building Socket, which is accountants proposals, pricing and proposals for accountants and bookkeepers. And we're really trying to kind of nail that front end kind of space. And I think I might have been Telleroo's first accountant and bookkeeping type client because I pestered Andrew when I saw two simple words written down, payment API. And I know exactly where I was. And it's one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in my entire life.
Can confirm that is correct, and so I blame you for my workload, John.
Pleasure.
Um,
Pleasure.
but exactly that. So, as you can all tell from John's experience, he is the perfect person to have on here with us today. We have got slides, but this is absolutely not a presentation. This is very much a discussion where I'm going to be picking John's brains, but also giving you the opportunity to do the same. So, Q&A box is there. Please do pop any questions in as we go, and we will absolutely have time to get to those at the end. But let's jump straight in. The first thing I'm going to do is pop a poll up for everyone. Let's see. There we go. So this is just a quick question around what services you as a firm currently offer. It'd be really great to get some answers in there. But while people are answering that, John, you've obviously had a practice yourself. You built Xavier,
Yeah.
building Socket. What's the one thing that you've seen firms consistently underestimate when it comes to growth?
I think there's a massive thing here around like you're always looking for that new shiny thing. And that new shiny thing can often be, oh, I want new clients. So I think we underestimate the kind of the diamond clients we've actually got, that we don't focus enough attention on those. And I think we can even take it a stage further and we may even focus on the noisy clients rather than the diamonds that we've got in front of us.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Let me end this poll quickly and pop these up. Let's have a quick look there. There you go. You can see those results there. So we've got firms offering a mix of services, which is great. Anything that surprises you there, John?
No, I think like for me, this is really, really kind of pleasing that people are starting to do more. And I think this is the bit that really excites me of almost like there's that natural bit of there's lots of accountants, and I'll say kind of accountants because they're perhaps stuck a little bit in the dark. And I can say that because I am one of almost that bit of how do you start to nudge things through from almost that compliance. You do the bookkeeping, you get the numbers bang on, and then you can start to almost like add value and really bring it to life for
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. I know you have mentioned before that there's a bit of an exercise that firms can do. I think you call it the wow matrix. Can you share?
Yeah. So it's something that if you're using Socket, you can certainly do within kind of Socket, but it's a simple exercise. All your services across the top, and then down the side, put all your clients, and then it's just a little simple kind of heat map in terms of are you providing that service to that client? And if nothing else, it gives you that kind of view as to are you doing bookkeeping for all of your clients or some of your clients. And then sometimes you can just look at it, and some of your painful clients are painful clients because you're not doing a service for them. And so there's a real opportunity of spotting opportunities. And I think you can also take it a little bit further. And are there some tasks which stretch your kind of ability that you might want to switch off? And the reality is you're only doing it for one or two clients.
Absolutely. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but as you were saying there, that point around sometimes they're a pain almost because you're not doing enough for them is something we definitely hear a lot, right? We speak to firms all the time where they are doing bookkeeping for a client, but doing the bookkeeping is a nightmare because the client makes payments all over the shop that aren't related to specific invoices or particular amounts, and you're playing a bit of a guessing game of matching it up on the backside, right?
And I think there's something here of how do we demonstrate our value? We demonstrate our value by bringing into play our processes. So for me, it's like this is our business. We are the experts. And so some of this is then explaining to people why we're the experts.
100%. I think that is one of the biggest things when I speak to firms where there is a gap around that like value transfer to clients and how that's explained is that there is still almost a perception and the way it's kind of put across from some firms is that they aren't the experts, right? They're almost led by the client on, well, the client says they want us to do X, Y, and Z, and so we'll do those things. And I think often there isn't enough pushback to be like, actually, we're the experts here. We do this with hundreds of clients and we know what works and what doesn't. And therefore, this is why we're recommending it doing this way. And this is the process that we've built, and here's why. And like you say, they often then become the clients that are incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's like we've got a couple of examples we're working through at the moment in FD Works, and it's almost like that bit of things are taking longer, and you start to look at, well, why is it taking it longer? It's taking the longer because the client is doing what they want, not what we want them to do.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the pushback is almost like it's explaining why things are done in a certain way,
Yeah.
but it's also then almost kind of putting some barriers because it's taking us longer. That's the bit where we should be turning around and going, really sorry, but this is going to cost you more if you want to do it in your particular way. Adopt our processes, and these are processes that we know that work really, really well, and you can maintain your price.
Yeah, I do think there's just a huge part around having those conversations and that's such a challenge. I saw a conversation, it's a massive tangent, but I saw a conversation the other day of someone online talking about whether over the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see more and more firms bringing in non-technical people that are more salespeople to handle those difficult conversations and pitch that value appropriately to protect almost what's happening in the
Yeah.
background.
So, so much of it, like so much of this conversation we're going to have is around confidence,
Yeah,
and I think it's that bit of it's almost like let's be confident about why you should do something in a particular way, and yeah, everyone's also I don't want to bring AI into it, but everyone's kind of like but it's the human side of what we do which will make us win. And so it's that bit of how do we lean into the human side of things more and more than anything else.
definitely. Well, as you can see, the problem we're going to have today is me and John talking too much, but we'll move on. So, where does growth really come from? I think there is still a bit of a perception when I speak to firms, at least, and I ask the question of, right, you've told me you want to grow this year. What does that look like? Actually, most people tend to tell me that's going to come from new client acquisition,
Yeah.
which I think sounds good. People go, right, well, we'll get more clients, we'll make more money. But in reality, that isn't necessarily where that opportunity sits. So, throwing it over to you, John, why do you think firms are so focused on winning new clients?
I think part of it is it's what they hear. So I think there's this big thing around everyone saying, "Oh, I'm putting on three or four more extra clients, blah blah blah." You hear all these things, and so actually, it is then that expectation of you following, and so
Yeah,
it's almost that growth naturally seems as though it's putting on more clients, but the reality is growth comes from three things. One of those is new clients, but it's almost the bit of can you get them to buy more often, which is almost like more services, but then you've also got the basket size, which kind of consists of price, but also then it's like that thing of, are you maintaining and moving the price as they go? But how can you help them more? Like, so much of this comes back to like the conversations of what are their problems, and you almost then being in that kind of position of, I can really help solve these problems with the services that I provide. And so there's a bit of a shift here of, rather than thinking about things as a job, start to think about things as to, like, what's the problem it solves, and how can you kind of then position that problem solving as a value. So it might be small businesses struggle with time. So actually, bookkeeping isn't about maintaining it, it's about giving them more time back. It's about the quality of the information that will then enable them to make better decisions. So it's that whole kind of thing of, Kaylee, can I buy a van? I
Yeah,
don't know, because your data's out, like everything's out of date. But it's then that bit of, when you're doing the bookkeeping and you know where the business is, you can educate the client, then that's the bit. It's like, can I buy a van? Let's have a look at your numbers. Yes, you can. Like that for me is the bit that kind of really excites these kind of conversations, and where you can see growth. And it's like, you go and see a client you've been working with 2, 3 years down the line, it just feels more organized. It's
yeah.
like the simple things, like they've been on holiday, they've spending time with their family, they've got growth, and it's not painful. Those for me are like, that's why we do this job.
Absolutely. And I think there's one thing I always say to firms is to ask those existing clients, those ones that are doing well, the ones that are happy, of actually, right, here's the list of things we do for you, but what do those things give you back? Is it time? Is it confidence? Is it what is it? And then,
Yeah.
like you say, you can then use that language when you are looking at new clients and how you upsell existing clients, etc., and almost use that background. And we did a similar exercise where actually one of the big things that came out of what does Telleroo do for our customers was time. And whilst we kind of knew that, actually, there were often times where we had very much pitched the angle of it's risk, it's this, it's that. But actually, whilst yes, all of those things are true, the main benefit when you look through all the reviews and all the things people are saying, it was a time thing. And so being able to lean into that and use that, I think is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and for me, it's almost, it's that bit of picturing it even further. So, like, when I think of Telleroo, I think of myself sat in front of the TV, half trying to kind of, shit, it's payroll day tomorrow, bum bum bum. I know I've paid the wrong person the wrong amount. And it's like, I was that kind of business owner that was trying to do it because my banking wasn't sophisticated to be able to do it. So for me, some of it is, it's that bit of picturing your clients, and it's telling them, and kind of, when you get that connection, then that's the bit where it really comes to life.
100%. I've heard from a few firms that they almost find it easier to try and sell a service to a new client than to an existing client. Why do you think that is?
I think there's almost this bit of, you perhaps kick yourself that you should have done it already. So for me, it's almost like that bit of, um, if you've been working with them for a number of years, it's almost that bit of going back and going, actually, you should really do this or this. Like, it's almost, sometimes it's that bit of eating the humble pie. But for me, it's almost like that bit of, well, why shouldn't, yeah, why not? Like, and I think some of it comes back to our time as well, Kaylee, and almost that bit of, we are constantly stretched. So if I said to someone, can you take a day at the office next week? It'd be, I can't. Like, so we went through an interesting exercise a couple of years ago where we were kind of stretched. We weren't providing our end game, and we did a simple exercise where we got rid of a number of clients, and I threw it out to the team. And it's almost like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity where you can let those clients go. And it's like, as long as you've got a valid reason, you can let them go. And it was ones, well, Fred only rings us up when he wants something, and then he'll kind of hound us. And then once we've provided it, it'll disappear. They're always moaning about price. So we did this exercise And suddenly it was like a bit of a fresh revisit. The team then went back and spent time with existing clients and we spotted opportunities. So I think we hide behind this bit of our comfort zone. It's selling and we hate selling. And so, like, there's a number of things, but it's just about us spending time listening, asking questions and listening.
I think that's a big one is that people are very worried about getting rid of those clients and that drop in revenue. And I think this is why this whole conversation is so important because actually, yes, initially on the face of it, there is going to be that drop by getting rid of those clients. But like you say, if that gives you the time, the capacity to go in and work deeper with the clients you already have, you're going to be able to make that up in no time.
Yeah, yeah. And there's some really interesting kind of like exercises that I see others doing, which are brilliant. Of when you do something like a VAT return, they're challenging their team of going, if this was your business, what are the three things that you would do for this client? And it's just forcing the team to think about things from a slightly different perspective, as opposed to I'm running a process. It's almost like that bit of stop, come up for air, look around, what would you do? And it's almost that bit of oh, they're always posting the wrong, like paying the wrong amounts. And it's almost like, we could do bum, 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 bum. And it would help them out. But it's that bit, if you start to then look across your clients and it's like, what's working really well? How can I then re kind of replay that across other clients?
Yeah, and I think, like you say, almost building that into the process so it's something that happens really regularly is important. We had that. I used to work for a business where we did debt funding for businesses. We worked through accountants, and that's one of the things that we really encouraged was that on year-end checklists, when people are going through doing all of those things, actually, can we add two boxes in there? One to check what current borrowing looks like and when was the last time they reviewed that, and the second was to ask the question about have they got any plans for big purchases, expansions, new hires in the next 12 months that like it was there as a tick box, but it meant it was being asked. And it was that moment that goes, oh, okay, actually, maybe there is something we can do there. So I think not being afraid to almost make that part of a process can be quite powerful.
So we've FD Works, we've started to introduce a couple of kind of slightly different ways of working. So one is that bit if we bring kind of quality reviews in. So it's almost that bit of we're going through and we're looking at things from a kind of a training exercise perspective. But what we're also doing is we're doing kind of like spotlights. That's blindingly obvious that, yeah, we should always do that, but we don't. So we're almost then bringing it front and center. So it is almost like for the next quarter, we're going to do this. And it's about building those habits so that then every single kind of conversation does include some of those things because I think we get a little bit complacent, we get a little bit lazy. So I love that idea of almost like the spotlight on things.
I like that. So we'd love to offer more services, but I think that's a very, very common one. And there are lots of excuses, I think it's fair to say, that come after that, because I don't think it's that any of the firms are incapable of doing so. There are just various blockers and hurdles in the way. John, from your side, where do firms start when they are looking at that list of excuses and going, yep, that's us?
I think it's kind of a really interesting one because so much of this comes back to like priority. Um, and I think it's, I see it as my responsibility sometimes as the business owner of can I be the one who kind of is that bit of a pathfinder? So I'm probably the one who's the most confident. I know how to do this. And so it's pulling myself out. And then it's about putting some of the pressure on myself of going, okay, how do I go out there and what are some of the baby steps of things that we can do, but I can also then turn them into something else that the team can run with. So it's that concept of simple, logical, and repeatable. And so it's almost like advisory, and I hate that word, I think is too big, but it's almost like, well, what are some of the smaller steps? So it could be off the back of a set of year-end accounts. What is it you didn't do last year that you'd like to do this year? and it's almost then it's turning that into something that will, off the back of it, we might be able to do something simple like a cost review. But it's about me doing it once, and then kind of handing it over to the team and getting out of the way to focus on the next thing. So I think so much of this comes back to we overthink things. We're aiming for the big step, but so much of this is just those smaller steps that we need to kind of make. And actually, we can do a lot of it on our own business. So like, how many people here have got a forecast or a budget for the next 12 months? And it's kind of like, it's criminal that we don't have those types of kind of things in place. But then we turn around to our clients and going, have you got a budget? So for me, it's almost like that bit of when you have something, it adds value to you, it then makes it so much easier to then be able to kind of share that with someone else.
Absolutely. I think there's two really great points here as well. One is absolutely that, like you just said, the fact that so many of the problems firms are trying to solve for clients, they are still dealing with themselves, right? And actually could be solving those internally. The other thing I think is almost circling back to what you said earlier around what is the problem that we're trying to solve for a client. We speak to
Yeah.
firms quite regularly that come in and they go, we want to introduce payments as a service. And I go, okay, what problem is that solving for your current client base? And it's like, oh, well, everyone's talking about payments, so we wanted to bring payments in. And I'm like, that's the wrong place to start. We're starting in the wrong place. What's the problem that we're solving here? Have we got a client that we know has this problem? Where do we start with that and build that out from? Because actually, I just don't think many business owners wake up and go, I'd really like a cash flow forecast today. They do wake up and go, I don't know if I've got enough money in the bank to buy the van to do this thing, like you said earlier. And so I think there is almost a bit of a reframe on that as well. It's not about how do we add an extra service on the services page of the website? It's what does that really mean for the clients and the
Yeah.
problems we're trying to solve?
So there's two things there. I think, first of all, there's this kind of bit of sometimes you will get a client who'll come to you and go, oh, I think I need a cash flow.
Yeah.
And it's that almost that kind of bit of challenge of going, actually, do you really need a cash flow? So for me, it's like if you've got money in the bank and you're not going to run out in the next 3 months, you probably don't need a cash flow. You need a forecast in terms of this is where I want to go. And it's for us to challenge whether that's the right thing in terms of what they need. The other thing as well is I think we look at everything as though it's a service. And so what do I mean by that? A service, you start with a blank sheet of paper every single time. And it's almost like, okay, I'm going to do this. Where do I start? And I really like this idea of how do we move things towards being more of a product. And so, like, it's then you've got a clear playbook in terms of the next time you kind of do it, you can take that playbook out, and it's going to get you three-quarters of the way there very, very quickly. And you haven't got to think, or you've written things down, and so you've got that documentation where it's like, oh, that bit didn't work. How do I change it or how do I tweak it? And again, it's that bit of having conversations with the people who are using our services to almost kind of get that feedback, what we do to improve things.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think on this, for I think the poll we saw at the start, people are offering a variety of services already, which is fabulous. For those that are still sitting more in the compliance focused space at the moment and thinking, where do we even start with this? What would be your advice?
Okay. For me is don't get hung up by what people are kind of telling you. So like if you look on LinkedIn, if you go to conferences, etc., there's this whole bit if you should be a business advisor. And for me, there is no way that we're ever going to be that pure definition of a business advisor of what they think. We don't get paid enough money to be able to do it. If you want a true advisor, then you're going to get someone in from like Boston Consulting Group. They're going to charge you hundreds of thousands of pounds. So for me, it's more that bit of how do we start to hold our clients to account? And that might almost be holding them to account in terms of can you send your receipts in this particular way? So I think it's about those smaller steps and it's about moving them kind of forward in terms of better quality of information and just holding more, having more conversations with them, being the expert, you being confident, and then giving the client more confidence. And I think that for me is the big thing here of how do we just help our clients to be more confident and how do we challenge them to do the right things. And it can be incredibly easy because actually you're not the one doing all the hard work. You are then literally kind of, right, okay, Kaylee, what are we going to do between now? And it's almost like, right, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. That is kind of like, well, let's write that down. And then there's a really nice way of just kind of like checking in a month's time and going, how are you getting on with? And it's just that bit of, I think for business owners, it can be quite lonely and they haven't got anyone to bounce ideas off of. And so I think then that's a really nice way of how do we hold their hand a little bit more, or actually even how do we bring them together? So there's some really nice ideas there of like new business ideas of actually why don't you take a few of your clients out for lunch to get them to connect, build a community, and even bring new people with them as well. So, yeah, I think some of it is just being creative around what those next steps are, but small, tiny steps.
Definitely. I think that big piece around business owners feeling quite lonely and wanting that accountability is huge. And back in the old days when I used to see lots of sets of accounts from businesses, I was always so shocked by how much they were spending on like business coaching and advisors and things like that. When in reality, all those people were accountability partners. They were just
Yeah.
saying, what is it you want to do? I'm going to check in with you in 2 weeks. Have you done it? No, why not? And actually they were spending thousands of pounds on these things. And actually I was like, there is such an opportunity for the firm to be doing that with them anyway, right? And not in a way like you say where it is someone coming in and they're spending hundreds of thousands and doing all this consulting work, but actually just asking that additional question when you do speak to them and popping that check in a month later or inviting them to that lunch, etc., like you said, can make a massive difference to that.
So I grew up in the 80s and like a lot of my parents' friends were bank managers, and it's almost like that bit of I remember kind of going out with them, and they'd be like, "Hi, hi, oh, that's so and so does such and such. Hi, so and so does such and such," and it's almost that kind of bit of they were pillars of the community, the pillars of the business community that people kind of came to and asked for advice, and it's not necessarily about solving their kind of solution, like they don't have the answers to everything, but actually they are very good at kind of like that networking bit and bringing people together. And like I worked in a bank, I was probably responsible for almost like hammering and increasing the set sizes that meant that it couldn't happen anymore. But that's us. That's we can do that. That's perfect for us. And so yeah, I think we've got a massive opportunity of being the bank manager um, of the period.
Well, John, I'll thank you for that because I moved out of banking because they kept pushing my portfolio into call centres and I got quite upset about it. So, but we've had a couple of questions in already that are very fitting to what we're talking about. So I'm actually going to drop them in now. First goes back to something you were talking about a few minutes ago, where someone has asked, what's the best way to actually extract that feedback from clients on what's working and what they're enjoying?
Have a conversation with them. So I think it's that whole kind of bit. If there's definitely something here about asking the question, and it's being prepared to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. What we've also done, and this led to a kind of a feature within Socket, is we did a simple CSAT score. So you know, a smiley face. Is it a happy face, a in the middle face, or a sad face? And we literally just send that out to clients. And you're always going to get Grumpy George, who's always going to give you a kind of middle of the road bit. But actually, if that starts to kind of curl up at the edges, then know you're doing something wrong. But equally, it's a real nice way of clients where it's deteriorating, you might not know that, first of all. So I've had instances where you've asked a team member, how's it going, Kaylee? And it's like, oh, it's all rosy, it's working really, really well. And then the next day you've jinxed it and you get oh, sorry, we're leaving. So that's a really nice way of doing it. But I think there's nothing surprise your clients. Like genuinely, I reckon if you pick up a phone and ring a client, you will wow them just by having a conversation. And it's almost that bit of, I just thought I'd ring up and see how you are. Like, it's a really, really nice way of doing it.
100%. I always, those moments are surprise and delight moments, right? Of like, how can you just check in and do something nice for them? And like you say, normally it catches them off guard and they are super happy to talk.
Yeah.
One more question I'm going to throw at you here, which is how do you charge for holding their hands more? This person said, I've just spent a fair bit of time talking to a client about looking into another revenue route. We've reviewed their plan, their prices, suggested improvements, but how do I go about pricing this in advance when I don't know if it's going to be a 30-minute call or tons of follow-up emails?
So I think where's really interesting is we're moving from this time of like billing on time and materials. So historically, it would have been, oh, just keep track of your time Samantha and then charge them on based on that. I think it's almost like so much of this comes back to the scope, and it's about agreeing the kind of scope of what you're going to do, but don't be afraid about holding the clients to account and getting them to do things. And I think this is where this is a good example of where I don't like the bit advisory, because advisory is almost like it's based on the word advice, and advice is giving something. So it's almost that bit of you want the client to do some of that kind of thinking for them. And so actually, I think some of this does come back to time boxing it. So estimate how long you're going to do it. And then it's that bit of sticking to it. So I think it's really, really hard. But I think it's also then that bit of when you're doing this for the first couple of times, can you start to put a bit more structure around it so that the next time you're then moving quicker? Or this has worked really, really well for this client. How can I reuse it? So sometimes think of it as an investment, which will then enable you to move faster the next time. Um, it's hard. It's hard, but I think it's that bit of experimentation.
We speak to firms, yeah, all the time where they're introducing payments, for example, and they start going through that process. And I give them all the reassurance in the world about how long it's going to take. But until you're doing that process yourself, you just don't know. And so sometimes, yeah, they are under or over kind of estimating where that will go. And until, like you say, you've done it that first time, that second time, and gone, okay, we're now confident this is the process, this is how long it takes us. It's then way easier, right, to work out what you should or shouldn't be charging for that.
There's also a great question of almost like that bit of what's the value of this to you? That almost kind of gives you the potential kind of upside. I think there's also then this bit of how do we establish the kind of floor as to if we did do it based on time, how much would it cost? And then you've almost got these parameters in terms of, well, that's what the value is to the client, that's what my minimum cost is, and then how do you position it some way in the middle?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had lots of people on the call that are doing compliance work, they're doing bookkeeping work. We had a few saying they're doing outsourced finance services. Um, One of the obvious services to then introduce is definitely payments. But John, as someone that's been through that process, I guess I almost want to rewind to the beginning of actually why did you, as a firm, even look at introducing payments in the first place?
So I guess you see the ability of like if you're a corporate business, you've got these kind of tools that make it incredibly easy. If you're a smaller business, typically it's quite clunky. Everything's like one by one by one. And what we were seeing is people were spending huge amounts of time wasted of almost like invoice comes in, pay it wrong. Or even we've had instances where it's almost like they've gone through that and they've just paid it and it's been fraud. So we could see that actually there was an opportunity of adding more controls around it. But the bit I really liked about payroll is it meant that we didn't have to worry about any reconciliations anymore. It was almost like that bit of we will create that kind of payment file, or we don't even create it, we download it and import it, and then it's one amount to kind of pay. And it also then removed that bit of us having to have access to the client's bank, which I think is quite risky. Whereas what we're saying now is payroll's done for you. Please, can you pay X? And it's incredibly easy. So not only does it make the client's life easier, it makes our life an awful lot easier because we haven't got anything to kind of reconcile. We know that it's right. Um, it's easy peasy.
Absolutely. I think one of the things when I meet firms out in the wild, shall we say, and I talk about payments, is they are very concerned about the risk associated with them being involved in that process
Yeah.
and they're worried, what if we get it wrong, etc. What would you say to firms in that position?
Like I think this is the bit where the controls, you're improving the controls significantly because actually this could be the first time where you're almost going to like dual controls. You've got an inputter and an authorizer. Well, that doesn't happen within the bank. You're eliminating recoding of information, and that's almost like is a sort code and account number right? Well, you've got validation. Is the amount right? And it's almost like it's that bit, the amount of times that I've just got the last two numbers the wrong way round. And it's like, I'm really good with numbers, but I still got it wrong. So for me, it actually improves the controls. And yeah, sometimes I think it's just that bit of documenting it, like write it down and work it through, and you'll start to see where the gaps are or where you could improve kind of things. But yeah, I think if you look at it, what you are probably or what the business is doing is way more riskier than what you're going to suggest with the use of Telleroo.
Definitely. I think I always say to firms as well, it makes clients incredibly sticky from a retention point of view. If you are involved in making sure that their teams get paid and their suppliers get paid, and you're doing that bit well, the client tends to be pretty sticky. So there's also a very nice piece to it from
Yeah,
that.
we actually did it in two steps. So we've tried to kind of do the payroll first of all. So it's almost like let's take care of your payroll because then that's almost like straight away they see the value. And then what we've done is we've kind of suggested doing the supplier payments. And what we're also then doing is almost kind of that bit of, well, let's do supplier payments once a month rather than when it hits your inbox. And you get all of the, oh, my suppliers won't like that. They like to get paid. And if you communicate to them and it's almost like we are always going to pay you on the 25th of the month and you stick to it, they will be incredibly happy and they can plan around it. The fact that you didn't pay them 3 or 4 days earlier doesn't matter. So I think this is also then the bit where you're bringing time back by doing a job once
Yeah.
and don't underestimate the value of those types of things.
The other thing I think is really interesting here, and from a, I say interesting, I find it interesting, is from an AML and risk management perspective across a firm. I think that with the changes that we're seeing in that space anyway, with the fact the FCA are going to come in and likely start giving some slaps
Yeah.
on the wrist for things, I think that payments is going to be a really interesting one because, for example, payroll is categorized as a high risk service line. But actually, if you can say that you've got eyes on where those payments are going and you've got confirmation of pay in there and you know they're going to the right places, these aren't dummy shadow accounts, etc., of people extracting money in ways they shouldn't be, I'd argue that risk reduces. And similarly, if you've got eyes on where supplier payments are, you
Yeah.
know where their suppliers are, you can see all of those things. I think it becomes quite interesting when you start taking a kind of zoom out of the practice and that angle of things, that actually the more visibility, controls, and processes you have, the much easier it is to evidence that stuff to external bodies when they are starting to come and look at that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is also, it's almost like you've made it even easier for us with teaming up with Zalma as well. So it's almost like we are already almost, we're already kind of checking the identity of our clients. So actually then that's great and that we can now share that with you and get the instant access to it. But yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Like, I worry less about those high risk things because we are closer to it, because we are kind of questioning it and going, is that right? And again, that's where advice can kind of come in. If you're starting to see lots of different kind of businesses, then you can almost kind of challenge some of it and go in, is this client overpaying? Because you start to kind of see where they're spending money. And there's instances where we've stepped in and we've saved a client money because we're doing their bookkeeping and the payments is an extra layer of kind of real questioning of, is this real? So yeah, I totally agree from a compliance point of view, but also then an opportunity. And that's almost like advisory because this is you demonstrating the value you can add.
Definitely. I think taking that even a step further, I think once a firm is involved in payments, there's also certain other conversations around cash and what they're doing that become a little bit easier. From your side, John, how have you, I guess, managed that conversation across into other things that they can then be discussing?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges for business owners is the likelihood is that they probably had a job before. And and it's that whole kind of bit of we've all been in the situation where our pay packet lands on the Friday and then we go out and we spend it. And it's almost like you go out spending it until you've got nothing left. I think that mentality is introduced when you start running a business of going, hey, I've got paid £10,000. Oh, let's make it easy. I've got paid £12,000. And then you steadily looking at it and going, I've spent it. But actually, £2,000 of that wasn't yours because that's that. And hopefully you're making a profit, which also then means you're going to have to pay some corporation tax. And what's one of the biggest issue we constantly see with clients is they've spent the money from a VAT perspective, they've spent the money from a corporation tax perspective. And so that's the obvious conversation to have with them around cash management of you 2 months through a quarter, this is what your VAT return looks like. And that could just be simply running the VAT return in zero, looking at it quickly. That's what should be put to one side. It could be a ready reckoning in terms of the level of profit they've made year to date. And again, that's another great conversation of, well, could they spend money in advance to kind of mitigate tax? Can you do some planning with them? There's just so many things which start with very, very basic kind of conversations. And so I think there's something quite exciting here of actually, can we start to put money in pots for clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like when you're involved in that payment process already, we see firms do it now because they are doing a bi-weekly or a monthly pay run for the client. It's part of that conversation. It's like, right, we've done the payments. Are you all good with that? Yep, we're happy. They're doing their approvals from that perspective. And it's like also make sure you're putting X, Y, and Z aside for those things that we discussed. And it is comes right back to what you said earlier. It's almost just that accountability piece, right? It's asking the question and making sure that they're staying ahead of it.
Yeah, and it's also like it's not there forever. Like and it's not almost like a bit of yes, you can use it, but remember you've got to kind of like top it back up. And for me, it's almost like it's getting them to think about it in quite a kind of fluid way. But yeah, if you think about those tricky clients, and I bet the majority of it comes back to almost like I'll call crown debt of money what they owe to HMRC.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move us on, but to the juicy bit around packaging and pricing. So, quite often I'll speak to firms, they get super excited about new stuff, and then it comes to packaging it and pricing it, and that enthusiasm definitely disappears a little bit. We've definitely talked about this throughout, but from your perspective, John, what's the biggest pricing proposal mistake that firms are making?
So I think some of it, like there's a bit that everyone needs to stand back from, and it's like I can't call it the velocity of what profit would you like to make within your business, how many hours do you want to spend in your business, and that kind of gives you almost like the speed limit as to how fast you should be kind of going. And I think it's using that as a kind of guide of if this is the rate of pound per hour that you need to be generating, you need to be challenging that when it comes to kind of the work you're doing of, okay, if it's £50 per hour and I'm getting paid £100, can I do this work in 2 hours? So there is that kind of bit. I think the other thing that I see all of the time, it's they use a proposal at the beginning, but they never ever revisit it. And it's almost like that bit of we sell time and like no matter what we do, we sell time. And I think it's that bit of it's very difficult to kind of quantify that because it's never ending. It's not like we're selling a book. And if someone wants 2 books, it's very easy to go 2 books. Um, and then when they take 3, it kind of changes. So I think the biggest thing here is a proposal isn't just at the beginning. You should be reviewing that constantly. So as the scope changes, you are very, very quick to respond on that.
And on that, like reviewing and reproposing, as you said, you should kind of constantly be doing that. I think for lots of firms that isn't happening, right? And how do you build that in to make sure it is there? Because I've seen firms that either they want to do it, so they go, right, we'll do it annually and we'll review it and see what that looks like, or they go, we'll do it quarterly and check what that looks like. And that, I guess, is kind of fine, but there's still time in between for things to have changed and gone wrong
Yeah.
and not been accounted for. How do you make that something that is like a live thing that's happening in a firm?
So I think it's a simple thing of almost like before you start some of the work, it's just checking in your proposal, is it in there? And if it's not in there, then that's the classic kind of scope creep. And look, we went we went through this exercise at FD Works, and what we were kind of seeing is we were just giving work away. And part of it is my fault of turning around and going, let customer service is really important. So if the customer says, can you, we will. But what we weren't doing is putting a price against it. So the exercise that we went through is almost like if it's not in the proposal, we will go back to the client and say, yes, we can do this for you, but there's a cost associated with it. To build the confidence, we did a zero value. So we said, this is going to be £200, but on this instance, we're going to discount it to zero. And what you'll see is you get one of 3 responses. Yes, please. And you get paid for work you're going to do for free. The client will turn around and go, no, thank you, I'll do it myself. So you're getting time back, which is great. Or the client will turn around and go, actually, it's not that important. And no one does it. And so for me, it's like it's eliminating the waste in there. But I would challenge people on this call to kind of go through that scope creep piece. And I reckon there's an instant 5 or 10%, which isn't about you working harder. It's just about getting paid for the work you do.
Yeah, I think like you said there, the key thing is before you start something, is
Yeah.
it what you've agreed to do? I think is probably the number one question there,
Yeah.
and then go from there. Perfect.
Scope is so important. Like we are fixing the price, therefore we need to fix the scope. And if something changes, then that's the bit where you need to kind of stop and ask.
Yeah. Couple of questions for you. So, I have a client that is struggling and wants to spend as little as possible on accountancy work, and I don't even talk about advisory. I do the absolute minimum, i.e., compliance, VAT, payroll, bookkeeping, but even this is taking a fair amount of my time. I, however, feel like they're losing out by not taking management accounts and advisory. I feel that they are leading their business blind. How do I convince them to take these extra services and prove that it will be worthwhile?
So I think there's an element here of possibly being selfish. So it's not that bit of we don't have to help every single kind of business. I think this is the bit where it's almost like I always think some of this is about setting them off in the right direction. So it's almost like that bit of what could you do in 20 or 30 minutes to set them off in the right direction that starts them moving to the right kind of place. So this is how I got into this whole thing of I didn't think I could work with small businesses, and one of my friends tricked me. And it was almost like I turned up at his office to have a look around his new office, and he said, whilst you're here, can you have a look? and they were pricing based on the number of hours in the year divided by the salary. And it's like, well, what about holiday? Oh, we haven't factored that in. What about the fact that you're not completely productive all of the time? So it's something really small that I said I would reprice it in this way, this way, this way. And they did that very, very quickly. And I realized that there was an opportunity of doing it. So I think some of this is about planting the seed and seeing whether they want to help themselves. But you don't have to help every single business. You've
Yeah.
got to be quite precious with your time.
I like that idea though of like what can you do that's just a little something that you can give them to set them off in that right direction, show them that little bit of value without, like you say, spending hours and hours doing something for
But it's not your problem. Like genuinely, this isn't your problem. Like you are there to kind of help, but you've got to look after yourself first of all.
You're going to like this one. With packaging and pricing, what is the best way to do it? I hear lots of people say charging hourly versus charging on metrics or value. How is the best way to structure things?
Okay, so for me, the bit here is reflecting complexity. So you have to kind of come back to what's the value. So what's the value in bookkeeping? Well, the value in bookkeeping is there's an element of time, there's an element of quality, and then there's an element of being able to make the right decisions. But you don't want to turn around to a client and say, well, that's 4 hours. So for me, it's almost like you're starting to kind of shift things into like what are the drivers of complexity behind some of the work. You structure that, and then it gives you the ability of being able to kind of go in there and ask questions which enable you to understand the client in a bit more detail. So, for example, number of transactions is a great one. Is there foreign currency that's involved? Number of bank accounts. And what you can also do then is you can challenge some of those things to almost kind of like simplify their business that will reduce their costs. And actually, it makes it simpler for you as well.
Yeah, I think good discovery of clients is really, really key there. I think I've definitely spoken to firms who almost get a little bit excited and carried away at the thought of new client or whatever, and some of that discovery isn't there. And then once they start actually bringing them on board, they realise that things aren't as rosy as they thought they were, and all of a sudden, that pricing that they quoted doesn't quite match what they're going to need.
And it's okay. It's okay, even if you've done a proposal today and you've done it on some guesstimates, when you know the facts, that's the bit where you go back and have the conversation with them. So it's almost like that bit of sometimes on those discovery calls, people are turning around and going, they, oh, this is about a price, go lowball it because the price is then less. But if you then open it up and it's a can of worms, well, the fixing of it might be a separate project, but then the ongoing bit, you have to make sure you're reflecting the reality. And if you're not making money on it, come back and revisit pricing. So it's not only about revisiting your client's proposal, it's about you revisiting your pricing itself. And it might be adding something, it might be increasing the prices of certain things.
Absolutely. Random question I'm going to throw at you. How do you feel about firms doing annual price increases, even if just inflationary?
Yes, yes, yes. Like they have to do it. Like they absolutely have to do it. And I think part of this is like education. If a client is kind of kicking your ass and saying why are prices going up, then that's a simple thing of pushing back to them and going, you put your prices up as well. Like things are more expensive now than they were 12 months ago. So why aren't we increasing our prices?
This is a good question for you. You have sat firm side and software side, and one of the heated debates that happens in the space, right, is software vendors putting their prices up and the impact that that has on pricing firm side. Two questions. From a firm side, do you charge software costs separately onto clients? And also, how do you handle those conversations with clients when software prices do continue to increase?
Like, let's take the classic one, Zero putting their prices up every single September. So the first thing I think you need to do is you need to separate out your software costs from the kind of core services. So it's very open and transparent because you'll get kicked of going, oh, I'm paying you £500. But if 50, £100 of that is software, you need to kind of break that bit out. So I think that's really important. But are you getting value? Like this is the whole kind of thing of are you getting value from that software? And if you're not getting value from that software, well, why are you even kind of using it? And my view of, yeah, if you're paying £50 for something, am I getting £50 worth of value? Yes or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice and simple. We like that. Perfect. You touched on this earlier. I just want you to reiterate before we start closing out the session. But be your own first client. Why and where do you start?
I just literally, I think some of it is almost like, um, an interesting one is draw out what a finance function looks like, because that could be your ultimate end game. We've all got our own finance functions, and it's just like, where's your own pain? Where's your own pain? And how can I kind of solve it? I think it's great of you going through the setup process yourself, because you start to work out what works, what doesn't work. And I think sometimes it's just that bit of, yeah, like eat your own dog food. Like, and that's from a add-on perspective, try Telleroo, but I think it's also then the whole kind of bit of build yourself a budget in an afternoon.
Yeah,
And then how could you make that simple, logical, and repeatable, and use that with your kind of existing clients?
amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to launch a poll for attendees while we talk about the next bit. But the goal here isn't for people to go away and launch 5 new services or products in the next 30 days, right? But actually, after this, John, if you said to someone you're going to go away and do one thing, what would that be?
I think some of it is like, I'd be tempted to take one client and almost go through that client and like, pick a big one where there's kind of like lots of opportunity, and you know that there's something there, and it's almost like, what could you do for them? And I think involve the team around this, do a bit of a brainstorm, because actually if you can start to almost kind of do something for that existing kind of client, you're then creating a blueprint, or you can then start to use that with all of your clients. And then it just becomes second nature that the team turn around and go, well, that works really well for Fred. So let's suggest Telleroo to them, the
Absolutely.
next one.
And what do you think is the biggest opportunity that firms are overlooking at the moment?
I just think it's those quiet clients. Like, spend time with those quiet clients. Um, just get out there and have conversations. Like, for me, it's almost like I love having those kind of conversations, find an excuse to go and see a client.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. Let me stop this. There we go. Amazing. We are super tight on time, but I might have time to chuck one more question at you if you're okay, John.
Okay.
Which is, let's go for, oh, okay. Which service is the hardest to sell but easiest to deliver?
Hardest to sell, easiest. I am going to go with payments, because it's almost like you're probably already doing the bookkeeping. Um, so it's a conversation around, how do I almost just make the payments? And especially from payroll perspective, it's almost like it's an extra button within your payroll software to just create that payment file. So yeah, I think payments is the one that I was before Telleroo was probably searching the longest for.
I am, of course, biased, but I would have to agree. But a huge, huge thank you to you, John. You have shared lots and lots of wisdom with everyone today, so massive thank you. To everyone on the call, thank you for joining us. You will receive recording, and contact details for both myself and John will be on there. So if you have any other questions, I'm sure we are both happy for you to reach out and answer any of those. But thank you very, very much for your time. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.